Football's expansion has seen our game grow from Victoria to all across Australia over the last 40 years. The Swans were the first club to move interstate, heading over to Sydney from South Melbourne in 1982, whilst the Brisbane Bears and the West Coast Eagles were the first expansion sides introduced to footy in 1987. It was thanks to a long-awaited growth that the VFL turned into the AFL. The success of the first wave of interstate clubs gave the AFL the green light to expand further across Australia. Perth saw a second team introduced in the form of Fremantle. Adelaide got two clubs in the Crows and the Port Adelaide Power, while Fitzroy and Brisbane infamously merged together to form the Brisbane Lions. Suddenly, footy was truly becoming Australia's game. Expansion seemingly worked a treat, as a number of new clubs all enjoyed immense success through the 90s and 2000s. The Eagles and Crows won 2 flags each in the 1990s, cementing their place in the AFL. Brisbane managed to steal the show in the 2000s by winning 3 in a row from 2001 to 2003, forming one of the greatest teams in football history. Port Adelaide won their maiden flag in 2004, while the Swans broke a decades-long drought in 2005, and the Eagles got one back over the Swans the following year. It was a 6-year stretch where interstate sides were dominating the game. Never satisfied, the AFL looked to broaden further, bringing the Gold Coast Suns and the GWS Giants in the 2010s, hoping to place a foot in the NRL markets. Though expansion may be deemed by purists as too much, it's known that it was vital for the VFL/AFL to keep afloat during the 90s, providing a chance for increased revenue and growth for the league. It's because of this that the AFL became the money-making machine that it is today, sophisticating itself and being able to boast full-time players on big contracts, while having teams house some of the best facilities in sports, a far cry from where the game was 3 decades ago. The AFL still did have its challenges despite firming itself as the #1 sporting code in Australia. The AFL wanted to grow even further, beyond our national borders. They were looking at playing the first games overseas, while matches in places like London and Cape Town had already taken place in the past. These were only pre-season games and never had the ambition of this new globalisation push from the AFL. New Zealand was the obvious choice, with the AFL getting its wish as the first ever game of AFL footy outside of Australia, played for premiership points, was held in Wellington in 2013. The project was spearheaded by St Kilda, who are the ambassadors to New Zealand. Sadly, and unexpectedly, the New Zealand fixture was only held for 2 more times before being rescinded after a low turnout and attention from the Kiwis. The New Zealand experiment failed. Not done with pushing overseas, the AFL, and more specifically Port Adelaide, looked to China as the next possible destination for the growing of our game internationally. Shanghai held the first game in China in 2017, with 2 more fixtures taking place in 2018 and 19. In 2019, Gil McLachlan defended the Chinese experiment, confident that it wasn't a waste of money and that the market was worth exploring. The game was cancelled for the 2020 season amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has now left the prospects of resumption of this fixture in doubt. It is worth noting the financial costs of having games in China, which are expected to be millions, while the attendance of games in Shanghai held no more than 11,000 people. Now, thanks to COVID on top of this already risky behaviour, risks versus reward has been at the forefront. An increasing need to expand overseas has shown the AFL cares more about overseas markets rather than fortifying its position in Australia first. Currently, neither the Northern Territory, ACT, nor Tasmania have their own AFL team. Only Tasmania is readily considered for home and away fixtures, while the ACT and Northern Territory are just dots on the AFL's radar. Given that the AFL is one of Australia's greatest codes, it's telling that one of the states and both territories, including our capital, don't even have their own professional club. Should the AFL solidify itself in Australia before even considering New Zealand or China of all places? The ACT does get 4 games per year as a home ground for GWS, but the AFL should look to expand on this and experiment in ACT even further. As for the Northern Territory, they get a handful of home and away games played in Alice Springs and Darwin. But again, further experimentation needs to be done, especially when factoring in the Northern Territory producing the highest number of players per capita. The success and feel-good factor of the Dreamtime match between Essendon and Richmond playing in Darwin was a great event, which should highlight the need to grow the AFL's presence in the Northern Territory further. 2020 has also served a big problem for the AFL's plans to expand, thanks to the financial toll of having to hold the 2020 season in the middle of the COVID pandemic, especially as Melbourne, the home of footy, saw a second outbreak of the virus. Reports have claimed that the hub program to hold teams in Queensland has cost the AFL $3 million per week, which surely serves a massive dent in any plans for further expansion. It does then beg the question surrounding some of the struggling clubs in the AFL, in particular the Kangaroos, and whether or not they'll forever stay in North Melbourne. Given what we know about Tasmanian footy, it's a fair question to ask. North have an incredibly strong base in Australia, with Bloodstone Arena serving as a home away from home, as North are often tough to play in this ground. Their presence in Tasmania has built a solid fan base in the island state, serving as a potential foundation for relocation. Tasmania, as a state, is due for its own team, be it by expansion or relocation. Football has been played in Tasmania since the very beginning, with clubs being formed there at the same time as the mainland in Australia in the 1860s. In the ongoing battle for footballing codes, Tasmania is certainly a footy state, much like WA and Victoria. Tassie has also given us some of the very best players to ever play the game, including Peter Hudson, Matthew Richardson, Roy Kazali and Alistair Lynch. Tassie deserves an AFL team as much as any place in Australia. The population is around 500,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but does display a high population density given the small size of Tasmania. To compare, its population is a third of South Australia's, which is significantly larger and mostly desert. South Australia does only have one major city, Adelaide, which holds two teams that have gone on to have great success. Tassie's landscape isn't desert and does pride itself as a tourist hotspot for a weekend getaway, priming itself for away matchups for the mainland teams. Tasmania also has two major cities that can house a team, Hobart and Launceston. Both have served well as interstate home grounds for both Hawthorn and North Melbourne. Previous bids by Tasmania have been rejected in the past, with former AFL boss Andrew Demetriou famously stating, "Tasmanians already watch AFL." As the reason for these rejections, Tasmania instead serves as an interstate home ground, while the AFL tries to tap into markets that don't care much for footy, where growth potential is larger. There exists a task force who are bidding for a spot in the AFL for Tasmania, with the proposed team to be the Tasmania Devils, targeting 2025 as the year for expansion. Already, the state is integrated in the Victorian setup, with the presence of the NABs League and NAB Leagues girls since 2019 and 2020. There is also a hope that they are including in the VFL in 2021-2022, although this is up in the air due to COVID-19. As far as stadiums go, Bloodstone Arena and University of Tasmania Stadium already have been successful in the AFL. However, there is a proposed stadium at Macquarie Point in Hobart, which could host a capacity of 30,000, on par with the stadiums in Queensland. Numbers on whom Tasmanians support are vague, but consensus dictates they either support Hawthorn or North Melbourne, for obvious reasons. This then does make one wonder, will the established supporters stick with these sides, or switch over to a new Tassie club? Another consideration is the decline of draftees from Tasmania. Though in the past, the state has produced some of the best players, this hasn't been the case in the past decade. Jeremy Howe, Hugh Greenwood, Jack Riewoldt and Ben Brown are stars in their own right, but the Tassie cohort in the AFL is top heavy, meaning that other than these players, the list thins out. A new club may help grow the game even further, providing a healthy injection of money into local footy, thus elevating more potential players from Tassie. It also wouldn't be the first time that the Kangaroos were touted for a move interstate. In 2007, they were incredibly close to being relocated to the Gold Coast, following a successful period at Carrara Metricon Stadium as their interstate home ground. It took a massive effort from die-hard North Melbourne fans to keep them in Melbourne, but it's easy to forget just how close they were to becoming the AFL's first club in the Gold Coast. The question is now, should Tasmania have an expanded team or a relocated one? On top of this, should the AFL seek to expand to 20 teams or stick with 18? And has COVID ruined these chances? Being it that the COVID crisis isn't ending anytime soon, and that GWS and Gold Coast are long-term projects that are far from over, it would be worth scrapping any further plans to expand or relocate for the time being. Tassie are worthy of an AFL team in whatever capacity, but now is not the time. North have fought off relocation in the past and have had a difficult 2020, but it's the start of a reset and a rebuild for the club. Expanding to Tasmania with a new club may just not be possible, as the money may not be there. COVID has cost the AFL millions. Gil McLachlan said at the time of the suspension of the season that it was the biggest financial crisis in the competition's history, with the league on the brink of collapse. It's remarkable that they managed to survive and be able to complete the 2020 season. But it may have come at a cost for any plans for expansion and relocation. The AFL just may no longer have any funds to make a Tassie team happen in the near future. Thanks for watching today's video. This first appeared as an article on sportinghq.com.au, and the link will be in the description. Remember to like and subscribe, and to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, sportinghq.com.au.
Sporting HQ.